Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 17, Rules of Engagement. This episode aired April 8th, 1996. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, A Session?
No, it was perfect.
Well, that was the one where you were really unhappy with Miles.
I loved the Cisco side of it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that episode story arc about Cisco.
I'm just genuinely worried that with Happy Kira at the end, somebody's going to die.
Yeah, and I didn't like the hand waviness of it all. Like, oh yeah, now he's the emissary again. And everybody's fine with it. And we try to pretend like there weren't a bunch of churches that popped up in the night.
Church of Acorum.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is, again, an example of episodic TV kind of letting you down because it has to tell the complete story in such a short amount of time. When something like what went on in that story could have actually been the point of an entire season of a show. Yeah. So we had to cram it in.
TV has changed a lot.
It has, not always for the better. Should we talk about this episode?
I think we should.
Well, in the cold open, Worf is having some kind of a nightmare that he's on the Defiant surrounded by dead officers and Klingons holding batleths over their heads in celebration. When he pushes open the door to the bridge, he sees now several dead Klingon children, which is not what I was expecting. A very grim sight.
I thought it was Alexander initially.
At first, yeah, me too. Then he jolts awake, and we see that he's in a cell with Odo watching over him. Odo tells him he needs to get some sleep because his hearing starts in 4 hours. And we cue the theme song.
Klingons having nightmares. That must be the stuff of nightmares.
Well, he says something about the Klingon dreams being really awful, like something that humans couldn't tolerate or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know, back in Rejoined.
Yes, yes.
Well, apparently so, because this was not fun.
It was also a surprisingly short and very to-the-point opening for a change.
It was.
They've been doing these very long openings, and this one is like, bang.
Yep. Boom, something bad happened. Worf's in jail. Well, now we go to said hearing, which is being run by a Vulcan Starfleet admiral. She says, "We're here to consider the request of the Klingon Empire that Lieutenant Commander Worf be extradited for trial on charges of murder."
Oh.
We have Advocate Ch'pak from the Klingon Empire on one side and Worf and Cisco on the other side in their red dress uniforms. These dress uniforms are getting a lot of play this season.
Obviously, they tailored them and they're going to use them.
Absolutely.
They cost a lot of budget. We're going to get them in as many episodes as we can.
I mean, they clearly upgraded them, so yeah we're going to wear them. So the charges are that while Worf was commanding the Defiant, he knowingly fired on a Klingon civilian transport ship, killing 441 Klingon civilians. Yikes. I didn't realize there were any Klingon civilians. I thought they were all just the ones that we've known.
Yeah, I don't believe Klingons have civilians. There are just warriors who are fighting and warriors who are not yet fighting.
Yeah, because there's a thing that Ch'pak says later about women and children, and I'm like, oh, come on, okay? The Klingon women are also fighting. We've seen the Duras sisters.
It's a little bit of a strange distinction to make, considering how much we've seen of the Klingons.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen the Duras sisters. We've seen the women fighting. It seems so silly to make it act like they're, I don't know, little helpless waifs.
And Klingon children. Some of them were barely old enough to slay something with a batlath.
Yeah, right. Well, the Klingon Empire intends to prove that Worf was grossly negligent in his command of the Defiant, and his lust for combat overrode his good judgment. The Klingon Empire wants him to face the judgment of his own people. Cisco says 2 Klingon warships were attacking the Defiant at the time in question. This was a combat situation, and the civilian ship decloaked suddenly in front of the Defiant. Worf gave the order to fire because he believed he was firing on a warship. Cisco intends to show it was an inevitable but tragic accident. So the Admiral says the hearing will start tomorrow.
Wow, so that's quite a serious intro.
So the actor playing Ch'pak is Ron Canada, and he's been in many things. In terms of Trek, he's also in an episode of Next Gen and an episode of Voyager. Different characters each time, I believe. He's also been on the Orville a few times as well, and even though I've only seen a couple of episodes of that show, I'm pretty sure I've seen him there.
That's funny.
And he was also in Dallas in the late 80s. I mean, how many Dallas actors have been on this show? He's at least the 4th.
I have not kept count.
Yeah, there's been a lot of them, including the one who shot JR.
Oh, that's right. She was a Cardassian, right?
She was.
Yeah, see, that's why you can't trust Cardassians.
I see. The first one was a Cardassian too, because it was the one that had been altered to look like human.
Oh.
And Tribunal. That was the first guy.
Miles's friend.
Exactly. Sisko and Odo are on the promenade talking, and Sisko asks him to dig into the Klingon commanding the transport ship. He hopes to prove the transport ship intended to join the battle and it wasn't an accident, so he needs something on the captain. And so the Odo mystery begins.
Yes, it's one of those episodes. This is a great scene. I love that they're doing a full walking, talking, tracking shot down the promenade.
Yep, with full activity behind them and around them.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen any of these. We've seen the overview shots of things happening, but not this sort of classic tracking view.
You don't get that very frequently, I believe, because the sets are pretty small.
Yeah.
You know, like when we talk about why aren't they ever running? Well, they're running because there's nowhere to run. It's always these little short stints.
It's nice to see a shot like that. It gives it a real sense of just how busy Deep Space Nine is, how much stuff is actually going on there.
Yeah, and it seamlessly then changes into Sisko talking to Ch'pak.
Yeah.
Who gives him his witness list and also seems to reveal a little bit too much about the Klingon motivation in this trial.
Right, yeah. He seems to be giving away a lot of the strategic objectives of what the Klingons are doing. Did nobody brief him about keeping his mouth shut?
Yeah, I was wondering why. I mean, he thinks that once Worf is extradited, the Federation will be forced to admit that one of its officers committed a massacre, which will put them on the defensive. He says this will provide the Klingon Empire what he calls certain opportunities. Basically, he says the Klingons will gain sympathy, which is something they would have never won in battle, and this will allow them to respond to the Federation, and no one will think they're out of line. I'm not sure any of that is true. That seems like quite a reach, but it's so peculiar that he reveals all of that, because now he's giving Sisko even more motivation to fight for this.
Yeah.
What if somewhere along the way they had just decided, you know what, it'll be better for us if we just hand Worf over and stop having this fight. But now they never will after this.
Yeah, they know that this is part of a strategic plan, that this is political maneuvering.
Yeah.
Take that to the Advocate and say, look, this is a politically motivated event. Don't you think that would sway Starfleet or the Federation's view on this whole thing?
Well, I suppose that's possible, though I think it's legitimate that he's on trial for this. This seems like a pretty bad thing that happened, and perhaps he was negligent. All they're really doing here is trying to decide if he should stand trial for this crime with his own people.
That's a good point, yeah.
And
okay.
I guess it still makes sense, but I could see that one of the nasty admirals in Starfleet could have made a decision politically to hand him over.
Yeah.
But now we know what would happen. So I feel like he played his cards too quickly.
Right.
It was a weird conversation. I was trying to think the whole episode. I was trying to figure out, why would he have done that? What did I miss?
I think it was just writing exposition, so you know what's going on.
It just seems like he should have told somebody else. Like, it would have made more sense almost if he had told Worf.
Oh, right.
And not told Sisko.
Yeah, that would have made perfect sense. That closing line, the truth must be won.
Yeah, Sisko reminds me he hasn't quite won yet.
How the Klingons view the legal system. It makes perfect sense that this is just another struggle.
Yeah, he views it as a battle, right? I think he says something about this being his battlefield.
Exactly.
Well, now at the hearing, Ch'pak says he accepts all of the facts of the case, which makes Sisko just call for an end to the hearing. But it's a trick, of course. The Klingons don't care about facts. They care about what was in Worf's heart. Was he a Starfleet officer doing his duty, or was he a Klingon warrior reveling in the battle?
I feel like I need to insert that joke about the don't confuse the issue with facts. I just want the truth.
Because Ch'pak says if he was a Klingon lost in the bloodlust of battle, then only the Klingons can judge him. Interesting tactic.
Yeah.
The Vulcan judge agrees that motive is relevant. And so the hearing continues.
Ch'pak is just great, and Ron Canada is doing a really solid job. He goes from this very reasoned legal representative and talking, very much the language of the Federation, and then goes into full shouting Klingon mode when he's talking to Worf. I found it great fun to watch.
Well, he's a typical television theatric lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's very good at it. He's gone into this with one plan, and he does manage to execute it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now we get Dax on the stand as an expert on Klingons, even though really it was Curzon who was the expert. She agrees that Klingons are violent and have a bloodlust. Ch'pak tries to get her to admit that these instincts took Worf over on the Defiant.
Yeah.
But she says Worf can control it. And then they do this sort of flashback to their holosuite play fighting, and in the fight, Dax says she can see the killer instinct in his eyes, but it always goes away. And this was where we kind of started this. I don't know if it was a directing choice or if it was maybe in the script, where we go back to the event in the past and we have the actor talk directly to the camera as if they're testifying while in the moment. It's not something I've seen them do before on this show.
No, this show is full of unique little things, like the walk down the promenade.
Yeah.
And this piece where they're sort of breaking the fourth wall, and it's like they're talking to you.
Yeah.
It's a really clever little choice. If you kept this in the same style as Tribunal, it's going to be just a courtroom drama, which has been done so many times before. But with this, I feel it turns it into a much more interesting visual episode. It's the same material, but they're presenting it in a new way. I remembered the episode, but I'd forgotten about this directing choice.
Right.
And it really changes things.
I mean, we have had so many great episodes of these little trials, at least on Next Gen. If they were going to try to stand out from it or try to just look a little bit different, this was a good choice.
Yes.
Tribunal was so much more about what was going on in the Cardassian legal system, right? That was a whole different thing and had a different focus, where this really is the sort of focus of this show, is this little hearing.
Because I'd see it as hard to beat, like, Measure of a Man with Data and Riker.
Impossible. But you also had the drumhead from season 4, which is without a doubt one of the greatest episodes in Trek history.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think it was a good choice here to try to do something a little different. And I don't know if you noticed this, but this was directed by LeVar Burton.
Oh,
yeah.
I did not. It really does make something different when all of a sudden Dax turns to you and starts talking at the camera.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, excellent.
Well, somehow Ch'Pak has info from Worf's private files, and Worf says he has nothing to hide, which is always a mistake. I mean, take advantage of the legal rights afforded to you. But so, I mean, you always know that's going to be trouble.
But it also fits Worf.
Yes.
Worf's honor will not allow him to keep it secret.
Well, Ch'Pak describes one of Worf's holosuite programs, which is a reenactment of an epic Klingon battle. Are there any non-epic Klingon battles? That's what I wrote down. When Worf plays this program, he always plays the part of the conqueror, which ends with the hero burning the city to the ground, killing everyone, including non-soldiers. And this is where Ch'Pak says, including the children and the women. And it's just like, oh my gosh. I'm sure the women all had weapons.
Who are all warriors as well.
I also thought here, are they trying to tell us that, video games have made Worf violent?
That's totally what I took away from it. This is like the whole video game argument.
As a message from the 90s.
They're not video games, they're murder simulators.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You know, like how rock music corrupts children.
Yeah. Well, in the dramatic moment, Dax tries to say it's just a simulation. But as in all television trials, she gets trapped saying a thing she doesn't want to. Ch'Pak now gives a little speech about Worf being a killer, and Sisko objects. This only proves that he knows the story of that epic battle and nothing else.
Has she forgotten about the, I have no memory of that?
Well,
I don't recall. I have no memory.
I'm sure he could have gotten the story out without her saying that. But yeah, nobody pleads the fifth. Did you notice in this scene that Sisko only has 3 pips?
Oh, that's a little bit of a mistake.
He had 4 pips earlier. I rewound. So I had to back up and check, but it was like, whoops, one must have fallen off.
This is why the continuities person life is a nightmare.
Probably fell in some hummus in the craft table. Somebody found it later. Now Sisko is on the stand and his pips are back in place in the next scene. He flashes back to when he ordered Worf to command the mission in question. An outbreak of a plague struck a Cardassian colony, and the Cardassians need to get medical supplies and relief workers there. But the system borders Klingon territory, and they're worried about raids. Worf agrees the Klingons are going to be a problem. Starfleet has agreed to protect the convoys because they are of a humanitarian nature. There will be 7 convoys, each protected by 1 Federation ship, and Worf will command the Defiant on one of these convoys.
Shouldn't that be a Cardassian-tarian mission?
Instead of humanitarian? Yeah, they need some sort of generic word for being, which I guess is humanoid, so maybe it would be humanoiditarian.
Then you sound just like Odo.
Well, but that's not insulting. Whereas Odo would use it as an insult. You humanoids always need humanitarian convoys.
Yes.
Well, back in the trial, Sisko says he was confident Worf was the right officer for the job. Now, for some reason, Quark is on the stand, and he's babbling on and on about something, which irritates Ch'Pak, who tries to get him to the point.
At least Quark is annoying to Klingons as well.
He is an equal opportunity annoyer.
Yeah.
He says Worf came into his bar in a good mood, which was unusual, and then they discuss his mission, which, why would Worf discuss this with Quark? I don't buy it.
Why would Quark know it? Everybody seems to have known about this mission.
Well, Quark knows everything. And also, he seems like he has Cardassian contacts. At least that's what we're supposed to believe because, he was on the station when the Cardassians ran it.
Now, this raises a question. Quark clearly knew about it. Do you think something like this was being kept a secret? Or do you think it was pretty much out in the open? I think it was out in the open because the Federation is still under the assumption that having Starfleet ships there, the Klingons will think, oh, we won't attack them. They're Starfleet ships. They really haven't twigged that the Klingons don't care yet. Remember, like Sisko, when they rescued the Cardassian ministers?
Yeah.
Oh, well, if there's a Starfleet ship there, they probably won't fire at us. You have met Klingons, right?
Yeah, I was wondering about that as well. Would they have just made it public knowledge because they wanted the Klingons to find out and they wanted people to know?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I would just think you would want to keep all this stuff quiet. But I don't know. It seems like Quark knows, so maybe everybody knows.
Yeah, like it was deliberately made public.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Quark remembers asking Worf what will happen if the Klingons go after the convoys, and Worf says, I hope they do. So Ch'pak plays this up as Worf looking for a fight.
He's a Klingon. They're always looking for fights.
That seemed like such a normal thing to say. It's like, yeah, come at me.
I know, right?
It's not like he said, oh, I'm going to kill everybody. But anyway, I can see how he used that. Sisko goes to see Odo because the hearing isn't going that great. Odo doesn't have anything interesting on the captain or on the flight plan of the ship. Everything seems relatively plausible. Though Odo is suspicious that the Klingons seem overly willing to answer his questions. I'd be very suspicious of that.
Yeah.
Sisko says if the captain isn't the issue, then dig into the passengers on the ship. Neither think this is going to bear any fruit, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah, I like how Odo is experienced enough to notice when people are being too helpful.
Yeah. He says when they're being too helpful to a police officer. I like how he thinks of himself as a police officer.
Well, this is the Odo Mysteries, and he is Detective Odo.
Right.
It's a shame that Garrick is not involved in this somehow, because then it would be like Atiba named the potential spin-off show Stretch and the Weasel.
Yeah, he said he got that from a YouTube channel. So now Miles is on the stand, and we switch to him on the Defiant during the battle. They're under attack by 2 warships that are trying to draw the Defiant away from the convoy. The ships would do this sort of cloak and run thing, repositioning for attack. So Worf thinks he sees a pattern in what they're doing, and he prepares to use quantum torpedoes as soon as they detect a ship decloaking. But when a ship begins to decloak in front of them, they fire immediately, and then they realize too late that they blew up the wrong ship.
It's a really nice touch that one of the attacking ships is a classic Klingon battlecruiser.
Yes.
From the original series.
Well, they talk about that a few times, about the Klingons using their old ships forever. On the stand, Miles says that he stands by the decision Worf made, and he believes Worf to be an honorable man. Well, then Ch'pak switches the story to ask Miles what he would do in the same situation. So now we see Miles on the Defiant in the captain's chair, in a thing that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And Miles eventually does admit that he wouldn't have fired.
To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Miles could literally just sit there and say, I wasn't in command. I wasn't in command. It doesn't matter. I wasn't in command. He doesn't have to answer that question.
I agree.
It's purely hypothetical.
I totally agree. And also, I question him as an expert, as even though he's been in 200 plus battles, he's never been in command of a ship full of people. Yeah. Protecting a convoy of relief workers. I mean, he's never been in that situation. That's what he should have said. It was so speculative what he said.
Let's also point out relief workers for a race who he fought on previous occasions and was put on trial on their planet.
Yeah, it makes no sense that he's an expert.
You could make the argument that you wouldn't want to ask Miles that, because what if his result was, oh, I would have let the Klingons destroy the convoy, they're only cardies.
This is where it should have been Kira on the stand.
Well, Kira is a completely different situation. My concern would be, if you put Kira in command of the Defiant, one of the Cardassians might make some comment to her or say something that upsets her. Then she joins with the Klingons, destroys all the ships, comes back and says, yeah, it all went wrong. Don't know what happened.
No. We have seen
we were too late.
Kira grow beyond that, and she always follows her duty. Although I do think if they had asked her the same question, she would have just been like, yeah, I had a shot.
That's interesting.
Which is maybe why they didn't put her on. But Sisko could have put her on. I didn't understand why she wasn't involved in this trial.
I wonder if the Klingon advocate would complain that she's not a Starfleet officer, so her opinion is not valid, because his whole take on this seems to be that Worf doesn't have the same morals or thinking as a Starfleet officer.
Yeah, but she was a member of the crew and she was on the ship. And if he was just trying to get opinions on whether or not he was following bloodlust and nobody else would have done that, she could have given an opinion. But I get your point. You're saying he very specifically said at the beginning, was he being a Starfleet officer or was he being a Klingon?
Yeah.
But, Kira works around Starfleet officers all the time. So.
Yeah, so it would make sense Sisko would want her.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good point.
Well, I mean, she's in the episode, but barely. So Sisko's having a drink in the Replimat when Ch'pak comes by asking him to concede. That always happens on TV, right?
Oh, yeah. Plea deal.
He says he'll even defend Worf to the Empire because he just likes the fight. But Sisko says, no thanks. He realizes that Ch'pak is worried about what Worf will say on the stand. And Ch'pak is like, oh no, you should be worried about what Worf is going to say on the stand. Now outside of the hearing room, Odo has bad news. No passenger on the transport seemed to have motive to hurt Worf or the Federation. But he says he's not giving up.
Of course not. He is Odo.
So Worf is on the stand now, and he's giving his side of the story from the Defiant. The Klingons attacked without warning. He admits he was excited by the fight, but he was focused on his duty. He knew they were passing through shipping lanes, but a civilian ship decloaking in the middle of a battle seemed pretty unlikely. He says he would do the same thing again because not firing would have been negligent.
Interesting. He does point out that Miles is looking back at his decision, and he was the commander trying to look forward.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, that defense is completely valid.
It is. You don't know what you would do in a situation. It's so easy with 20/20 hindsight, right?
Yeah.
To say, I never would have done that. So Ch'pak now starts goading Worf about being stripped of his honor by Gowron. He says since he was raised by humans, he's maybe always been a traitor in his heart.
Ooh.
I mean, he just keeps poking at him.
Yeah.
It gets so worse when he starts poking him about his son Alexander until Worf gets mad, jumps up and punches him. I mean, we saw that coming 100 miles away.
Right.
And Sisko looks at it like, oh, great. That made me laugh.
I do think Worf missed a chance here.
Yeah.
He should have pointed out that culturally, speaking like this as a fellow Klingon to a Klingon, you're going to get punched in the face.
That's probably how it works in a normal court.
Yeah.
Well, Ch'pak from the ground is happy because he got exactly what he wanted.
Right.
And I think if we wonder if Worf is still a Klingon, I think it became pretty clear that he still is a Klingon, or at the very least a hothead.
This episode is displaying that Worf still has a lot of those Klingon attributes that come to the surface, regardless of his training and position within Starfleet. It's sort of, if you like, hard-coded, and he hasn't got control of it yet. And I feel that's sort of the theme of this episode.
Well, it's funny how they've spent the last several episodes where Worf was involved convincing us of the opposite, right? And convincing us that he really has sort of tempered those Klingon attributes.
Yeah.
Mostly it's when other people are telling him that he has. But he has that one moment in The Sons of Moog where he says, oh my God, I'm not a Klingon anymore. I should have been able to see that guy was going to do something nefarious, but I couldn't see it. If I were a true Klingon, I would have seen it. And I've even, in previous episodes, I've defended him that he has these sort of emotional outbursts really under control. And he's shown us that many times, including A Way of the Warrior. And we talked about it in Paradise Lost, where you were kind of joking that, oh, Worf's going to destroy the Lakota, right? As soon as they started a little battle, that was going to be the end. And I was like, no, he's in control. They've been showing us that he's in control.
Right.
And now we've sort of flipped it in this episode just enough to make us think, well, wait, is he? I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that's been going on this season.
Yeah, I would agree.
While the hearing is in recess, Odo comes into Sisko's office with good news. Though we don't know what the good news is, he just gives him a data pad. I love it when they do that. And we go back to the hearing, and Sisko has new evidence to present. He asks Ch'pak to take the stand as an expert witness on the Klingons.
Good move.
And he gets him to admit that the Empire and the Federation are neither friends nor enemies right now, and trust is difficult between them. Sisko asks if there are times the Klingons feel it's in their best interest to deceive the Federation, and of course Ch'pak doesn't quite go along with this prodding.
Yeah.
He's dancing around a bit.
This guy's good. He's very slick.
So Sisko hands him a pad with a list of names, which Ch'pak recognizes as the people killed on the transport. He says this list is seared into his heart, and he'll never forget it.
He calls them the list of heroes.
Right. Sisko thinks it's quite a diverse list, and they seem to be quite a random list of people with nothing in common. Their one thing in common is that they were all on the same ship. Ch'pak agrees, and he says they simply boarded the wrong ship at the wrong time. And Sisko's like, seems like a lot of bad luck, because the same exact group of people all boarded a different Klingon transport ship about 3 months ago that crashed. And now, 3 months later, miraculously, all of the same people reappeared, only to end up on a ship together again. Seems like these people were killed twice. Admiral Talara is looking carefully at the list. She's like very serious face as she's doing that.
I like it when Sisko says there, this is a very unlucky group of people, wouldn't you say?
And the guy's like, I don't believe in luck, and he doesn't believe in fate, but
yes,
clearly believes in conspiracy and lies. Well, Sisko asks if it was possible that this whole affair was staged, so the only Klingon officer in Starfleet would be accused of a massacre, and the Federation would be forced to stop escorting the convoys. Whoops, caught.
In the act. Yeah, the advocate relents and says, yes. This is the bit where I think they missed how Klingons behave. I don't think he'd say yes. I think in that situation, he'd say, what are these Federation lies? He'd avoid answering the question.
Yeah,
He'd say, oh, this sounds like betrayal.
Yeah, I was also surprised there was no, oh no, you're lying. You doctored those records.
Yes, yeah, I don't think a Klingon would give up even in the face of truth.
Although maybe we're supposed to believe that this guy actually is an honorable advocate and that he was doing the job as it was supposed to be done.
Oh,
because I do have a question in my overanalysis of did he know what was going on? Because it seemed like at the end there, he was surprised by this.
Okay, that's a good question. Should we talk about this in the analysis?
Sure. To the Defiant we go, and Sisko has come to tell Worf about a party being thrown in his honor. Worf is having a bit of a crisis of conscience as he realizes that he did have something to prove when he took command of the convoy.
Yeah, Worf reveals to Sisko that he wanted a chance for vengeance, and he should have not accepted the mission. That was his mistake.
Yeah, he said that he felt relief at the chance for it.
Yeah.
Both when he took that mission, but also when he punched Ch'pak. So it was interesting. But yeah, he realizes he shouldn't have accepted the mission. And Sisko says that was his first mistake. And then he asks, what was your second? And Worf says he should have checked the ship before he fired. You're damned right, Sisko says. You made a military decision to protect your ship and crew, even though you knew it was a civilian shipping lane. Starfleet doesn't put civilians at risk just to save ourselves.
That I thought was great because this, I think, really draws the line between where people, I think, get mistaken that Starfleet is a military organization. Starfleet isn't military. Their remit is supposed to be exploration. They'll defend themselves, but they're not military vessels.
They're not, no. I mean, look at the Enterprise. It was full of families, right? That was not a military vessel. So Sisko tells Worf that if he can't make that choice of not putting civilians at risk, then he says, you can't wear that uniform. But then he really quickly softens and he says, no harm was done, no harm, no foul. And despite everything that's happened, you'll make a heck of a captain someday. And Sisko then encourages him to go to the party, even though Worf doesn't feel like celebrating. But Sisko points out that the party is for everyone else, not for Worf. Part of being a captain is knowing when to smile and make the troops happy, even when it's the last thing you would want to do.
Yes, nice.
Worf says life is complicated in the red uniform. That's the truth. And Sisko says, wait until you have 4 pips on that collar. You'll wish you'd gone into botany.
And Worf replies with, sometimes you wear 3, Captain.
Yeah, earlier today you had 3 pips on. I thought botany was a funny thing for him to say here, since Keiko. Well, anyway, off to the party we go. The end. Well, overanalysis?
That was quite an episode.
Was intense.
Very.
I mean, you always knew something was going to clear it up at the end, but it's always, highly intense. And they do the very tropey thing of making it worse and worse and worse. And then, everything's fine.
Well, and the bit where Odo comes in with the pad.
Yep.
And you don't see what the resolution is, but if you've watched these things enough, that's the turning point.
Yeah. Yeah. And they have to do that for the drama.
Oh, yeah.
Because Sisko needed to be the one making the speech. And I think how boring it would have just been if Odo had walked in and said, oh, hey, those people really were already dead. And then the end.
Right. Okay. So some overanalysis. The first one. So it must be super embarrassing for the Cardassians to ask the Federation for help in a humanitarian mission.
Well, it's the different government, though, right? It's not the military government anymore. Now it's the civilian government so I don't know. Maybe this is the norm.
But all those people in that government will have grown up with the Cardassian propaganda of they're this great, strong, powerful empire.
Yeah, but
Maybe everybody but the military realized the lie.
maybe. Because remember Ducat in whatever that episode was where Kira was trapped with him on the ship. He talks about how he's the only one who still believes in everything. So maybe he is.
He's the only one that reality hasn't permeated through to.
Yeah, him and Garrick are the only ones. Although, I don't know, I think they believe in a different Cardassia.
And I wonder if Garrick's view of Cardassia is a fantasy and he knows it's a fantasy.
Maybe.
In his heart. This is what I would like it to be. And the fact that he's separated from it means that he never has to see the reality.
Yeah. I mean, relief workers would be generally a combination of healthcare workers, military. So maybe there's a mixture of people in there who would be like, oh, God, the Federation, do-gooders, you know.
Yeah.
But they're also in a lot of turmoil right now. So
right.
Who knows? That's my complicated analysis. Who knows?
So it's an interesting turnaround of events.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is.
Next thing. So subterfuge. That does not seem very honorable.
And falsifying records reminds me of the House of Quark, where, that was very dishonorable when they were like trying to look for data. The Klingon that was trying to bring down that house, he was falsifying financial records.
Yes.
And Quark found it, and they did a whole big thing about, Klingons wouldn't do that. Well, somebody did that here.
Yeah, you're right. It's a similar kind of thing. Do you think it's pointing towards Gowron's lack of honor, that he'll go to any length?
Well, I'll tell you what I thought.
Okay.
I had a fleeting thought maybe a shapeshifter was involved.
Oh.
And, maybe Gowron is a shapeshifter?
Sounds like the kind of thing they would do.
Yeah, so, because it doesn't seem like a thing Gowron would do.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that he might be a little desperate because maybe things aren't going exactly as he had hoped. And I think it really irritates him that Worf sort of went the other direction, and betrayed him. So maybe he would do anything to get back at Worf. At the same time, I do wonder if maybe a shapeshifter is involved. I know you can't tell me. They might do something like this because they don't care about Klingon honor, and all they're trying to do is disrupt the different governments, and this might do that.
So within the council, Gowron could be getting negative feedback or people calling him weak because his good friend Worf, he couldn't even convince him.
Exactly. Yeah. He doesn't even have control of that guy.
So that leads on to, do you think that they knew it would be Worf on the Defiant and this whole plan was hatched for Worf? Or were they just aiming for any Federation captain?
No. Wouldn't have worked with any other captain.
Yeah.
Partly because I think the tactic they used, they did on purpose because they knew Worf would recognize it.
Oh,
and so he's the one who would be looking for that pattern. My imagination tells me that Quark is the one who revealed that Worf was going to be leading one of the ships. So I think it was directed at him.
Okay.
I don't think they would have done it otherwise. They would have done something different.
Yeah.
Some other crazy plan.
Yeah, I thought it felt very much like they were aiming specifically to get Worf.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Next thing, and I think we both have this one. Did Chaput know this was a setup, that this wasn't truthful?
I think no. Based on his reaction at the end, and also he didn't do that immediate "you're lying" thing that maybe you would have expected.
Federation deceit.
And he had no defense for it. So he wasn't prepared for that story. So I do believe that there have to be Klingons who are honorable in other jobs.
Yeah.
Because in order for a society to exist, it has to have laws and people to defend the laws and people to carry out the laws, and it has to have infrastructure. So it would make sense that the only honor that exists would be not just in the military. It would be in other areas. So I kind of looked at this guy as doing an honorable job. He was doing everything that he could. Like, he called it his battlefield, which, so if he's thinking that he's a soldier on this battlefield, this is just the way that I fight, and he was doing it with honor, I don't think he knew.
You're right. I would agree. I thought the way he caved at the end and admitted to it and didn't go into shouting and bluff and bluster and things, he was an honorable warrior, like Worf. And at that point, when he realizes that, if you like, he's been misled as well, the honorable thing to do is to give up on the lie. So he did not know.
I wonder if, like, was it Kovat in Tribunal?
Yeah.
If he goes back and says, oh, wow, Gowron did this thing, is that the end of Ch'pak? Or does he just keep his mouth shut and go back and just be like, no, lost? Or the whole thing was a sham. They were never going to let us take Worf.
That's a really good question. What happens to him now? He'll have to do something to defend himself against Gowron, because that could bite Gowron even further.
Well, there's easy evidence to show what happened. So, maybe something will happen to Gowron. I assume Gowron will just find a fall guy and blame somebody else.
Oh, yeah, you know it.
Do it the Cardassian way. Just blame somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next thing.
Yeah.
So the passengers who were killed on that civilian transport, this is actually pretty good for them, because they died in an accident. Now, they're actually the glorious dead. They died in the service of the Empire. So their place in Sto-Vo-Kor is assured. This is actually pretty good for them.
That is what Ch'pak said. Yeah, but in the end, that's not what happened, so.
Yeah, it's a list of heroes. Oh, it doesn't matter. Even though that this plan was subterfuge, their deaths were still for the glory of the Empire, so.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
I feel happy for them. Their place in Sto-Vo-Kor is assured.
Okay.
Next point.
Yes.
Isn't the Advocate himself kind of a contradiction of what he said about Klingons? Because he is so calm and composed, and you really don't seem to be able to get under his skin and goad him like a Klingon, even though this is his battlefield. I felt he contradicted his whole argument that Klingons get this bloodlust and can't be trusted with a weapon.
They can't all just be crazed lunatics who kill each other, because then they're like Sith Lords and nobody survives. So
they all plot against each other.
It's a Klingon exaggeration as usual.
Which is also a nice Klingon touch.
I'd like to see more Klingons like this guy.
He was very interesting.
He was. He makes the Klingons in general more believable.
Right.
Because they can't all be the clowns with the batleths.
And I think you're right. A lot of what the Klingons do, I think, is performative.
Yeah, right.
If they need to, they can turn that off and be, we're going to be sensible and talk about it in a Federation style.
Yeah.
Okay, so my final point,
yeah,
I think, is leadership.
Funny you should bring leadership up. I have a leadership section.
Excellent. Well, should Sisko have even requested Worf to command this mission, knowing that Worf currently has something of a grudge against the current Klingon administration? And leading on from that, should Worf have actually turned it down?
I can understand why Sisko asked him to do it.
Yeah.
He's trying to grow in command. Yeah. He's given him this red uniform. So he's somebody that he believes in. And this is certainly a leadership opportunity. And so a chance for him to step up a little bit. Worf has been saying all the right things and has been really helping with Klingons.
Right.
But I think the failure of leadership there is not that he asked him, or even not that Worf agreed, but they didn't talk about it. He can blame Worf all he wants for not speaking up, but you're the boss, and you should have asked the question, are you prepared for this? Are you having mixed feelings about this? You should have had a serious discussion about it.
Yeah.
My boss and I say all the time, everything's our fault. When you're the leader, you have to look at it that way. And I think Sisko should take that responsibility. And he even should have told Worf that at the end. He should have been like, we should have talked about that, and we need to be more open about this kind of stuff. And if you've still got these conflicting feelings, we need to figure out how to deal with them. That's my perspective.
That's very true. There was not enough discussion made about it.
There was none. Here you go. You go do this. Okay, that's what happened.
Do I get to kill Klingons doing it? I'm in. Now, final part of this is, should Miles have been given this assignment? Which I know Miles is a member of the lower class. You shouldn't put them in leadership positions. It just encourages them.
Married to a botanist. It's a whole mess.
Yeah, exactly. Or should Kira have been given this assignment?
Kira.
Would either of those have worked?
Kira. If Worf wasn't there, Kira would have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand the ranking here, because she's the first officer, right?
But she's Bajoran and not a member of Starfleet.
I understand. But is she not the first officer? Does it change when they go to the Defiant, because now it's a Starfleet ship? And so she goes to third in command?
But I think in a mission like this, where it's very specifically Starfleet,
okay. Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily want Kira to command it. And it also doesn't involve Bajor.
Yeah. It still wouldn't be Miles, though.
Yeah.
Dax outranks him.
True.
And I bet there's other people in Ops who outrank him.
I would wonder about that. Would you have Dax command the ship? Because she also has 7 lifetimes of experience.
Yeah, right.
And specifically experience with Klingons.
I mean, look, Worf is the one that it should be, but they should have talked about it and discovered that he wasn't the right person and he should have just gone along and they should have let someone else command. In fact, maybe Sisko should have done it.
That is a fair assessment. That is the end of my analysis. Okay, over to you.
I like the fact that you brought up leadership, and I actually have a leadership section too, but the thing that I have in my leadership section is none of the things that you, that you brought up. So that's really interesting, which is, I guess, why we talk about it. So my only other thing in overanalysis, and it kind of leads into the leadership category, I guess, but well, nothing happens, so everything is okay message at the end. I found it a little bit jarring. This isn't the first time we've done this on this show, where we're deeply traumatized by something and then, oh, never mind, it's fine, that thing didn't really happen. Those PTSD stressors, they don't just go away when you snap your fingers. Worf could really use a counselor here, somebody to talk to, somebody to help him deal with this. This is another opportunity for him to need to talk to Counselor Troy.
Oh, yeah. When he was talking to Quark, it was like he wanted a fight. There's a lot of stress there regarding his treatment by the Empire.
Absolutely. Also, I think it's important that Worf takes this as a lesson. You know, this thing that he did get lucky, but the mistake that he made was still real. It still happened. And so just ignoring it, I think, is a mistake.
Right.
All right, let me just slide right into leadership since everything's kind of tied together here. Sisko's speech at the end was certainly poignant. Like, you were making military decisions in the middle of civilians. You know, I think that was a really important thing for them to talk about. I'm not 100% sure how you can always separate the two when you're under attack, because there's a military operation going around you. And if you don't react, you're all going to get destroyed.
Yeah. I think that's the balancing act of Starfleet, though.
Agreed. I think Worf should probably be quite used to that, having been on the Enterprise, because it was always full of civilians. So, you know, they were always going to have to take civilians into mind when making decisions.
Picard was always going to have to behave that way.
Exactly. There were times where they separated the saucer section and tried to get the civilians, you know, to a safe distance. But that did happen very frequently, I think, because the effect was expensive.
So you just kill the parents and...
the spouses.
And the spouses, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Worf should be used to that. So this shouldn't be a brand new concept to him. The other part of it is I just had this conversation really recently with somebody about how there are times when you are speaking in front of a group, like maybe it's a group of people who report to you or just a team where you're in a leadership position.
Yeah.
And you do put on a smile and you do act upbeat, whether you feel that way as a person or not, it doesn't matter, because the point is whatever you project will bleed into others when you're the leader, especially if it's negative. The last 2 years of the pandemic, trying to behave as a leader has been super challenging, because certainly in the beginning, when there was so much unknown and there was not a vaccine and we didn't know how long it was going to take.
Yeah. I'm
on endless video calls where people are looking at me and they're afraid. Well, I'm afraid too. And it can be really difficult in those situations. But if I fall apart, they're definitely going to all fall apart. So I really felt that when he said that. And I have had these conversations with people trying to be managers where I'm just like, yeah, I get it. You're unhappy about that, but that doesn't matter. Okay, you got to show those 20 people or those 50 people that it doesn't make any difference to you and you're ready to move on. You can shut the door and have a conversation with 1 or 2 people about how crappy whatever it is, you know, really is, or how crappy you feel, but you got to project a different image. I like that moment, and I thought it was a real important learning moment for Worf, and I hope that he takes something from that, because he's not doing that now. Like his living in the Defiant and him telling Dax a couple of episodes ago that everybody needed to adapt to him. Okay, that is not how it works.
Yeah, you really did not like that.
I still don't like that, because that's not how it works.
So you find this very in line with your own personal reality.
I learned that lesson the hard way before I developed the poker face that I have now. So I think the message was on point. Now I have people tell me, I have no idea what you're thinking. Good. That's the way it's supposed to be. But Sisko was right. You don't go to that party for yourself. You go there for everybody else. You go there to show that everything is back to normal. You show that you're not hiding from it. You're stepping out of the shadows. But if Miles asks him about it later, if there are conversations, even at the party, if there are conversations where somebody says to him, Worf, do you really think you should have fired on that ship? Do you think he should admit it? I have an opinion, which I'll be happy to give, but what do you think should happen in that situation?
Being certain of your target is kind of critical because that's how you end up with friendly fire incidents and you end up killing your own people. It happens in war, and a lot of the instances are avoidable from my reading. He should be certain of his target.
Okay, you're answering a different question.
Okay.
My question is about the leadership part of it. As a leader, does he admit to the people who are under him on the chain of command that he made a mistake?
Yes, unquestionably, he has to. Because if those subordinates are in that position, let's say, like happened to Picard, where Picard took control of a ship, if you remember, after the captain was killed, when he was just a junior rank. If you end up in the situation of command, you need examples from the people above you.
Yeah.
And if your first reaction is just to start shooting everything, not a good example. He has to pass on that experience.
He absolutely does. I completely agree. And he needs to talk about it as a learning moment himself.
Yeah.
Every single person, no matter who you are, is not perfect. And so there are things that you can get better at. And so maybe I agree for a slightly different reason, but I totally agree that he should be like, I didn't make the right decision, because he doesn't want anybody else to make that same mistake, which is kind of your point, that they need to learn from it. But also, I think it's really important. This is, to me, one of the things that leaders fall apart on. It's important to show vulnerability. It's important to show that you're not perfect, because those people who report to you, they will relate to you more if they feel you as a human.
Yeah.
In this case, he's a Klingon, but you get my point, right? It's more about showing that I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect. I need you to get better at stuff, and I need to get better at stuff.
Yeah.
So I agree that he should absolutely admit to that. That's freaking leadership, okay?
Okay.
Let me just go to women of the future. It'll be really quick because there's not very many women in this future. Kira was on the Defiant. It seemed weird to me that for some reason she was never testifying, but Quark was. I mean, come on, that was really peculiar. Not a lot more to say than that. I mean, there's a little bit of Dax, but it wasn't that exciting. The Admiral didn't have that much to say or do, so really not much to say here for women in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Loved the episode. It took what could be a dull courtroom drama and really made it kind of interesting. The witnesses talking to the camera in the flashbacks, such a nice little touch, and a good leadership story that focused on Worf and his struggle to be less Klingon.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up too. I also liked just sort of the different directing choices and, the way that the show was shot. I liked this new Klingon that we haven't met before. I liked evidence that they were not all just soldiers, because that would have to be true. So I definitely like that. I liked the Sisko speech at the end. It
felt very Picardian.
Did it?
I think just in terms of giving the commander speech.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it did in a way. But I think he should have admitted his mistake too.
Yeah.
I think at this point, he should own up to the fact that they need to be more open about stuff, especially when it comes to Klingons.
Okay.
So that he can say, wow, we should have talked about it more. And now next time, I assume Sisko's going to question him more. I don't think it's good leadership to never own up to your own mistakes as well, because you all got to get better. Maybe you shouldn't have let him go off and live on the Defiant. Maybe you ought to be establishing a relationship. We're going to be stuck in the leadership section forever, I guess. Okay, so in general, I give it a thumbs up. I thought it was good.
Excellent. Even though two of the main characters on the station need little notes about their leadership and how they should improve.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
Okay, so that wraps up Season 4, Episode 17. Come back next week for Episode 18. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts in our network. We have podcasts for pretty much every Star Trek series, including the podcast that James and I are doing, Star Trek Prodigy, a Rebinge podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.